please grab a pen and a piece of paper so that you can use it for exercises during the presentation. It is my honor to introduce our speaker today, Stephanie Muskat. Stephanie is a registered social worker and psychotherapist and the founder of Compassion and Caregiving, a Toronto-based organization dedicated to supporting family caregivers and their mental health. She is a frequently requested expert and speaker on mental health and mental health support. She also sits on several committees and advocacy groups focused on supporting and advocating for family caregivers. Stephanie is familiar with FTD due to experiences in her own family. Her full biography can be found in the program booklet. There will be time at the end of the presentation for questions, but please feel free to submit questions as you think of them. AFTD is grateful to have Stephanie with us today to speak on this important topic. And with that, it is my pleasure to welcome Stephanie, who will take it from here.
Thank you so much, Anne, and thank you everyone for being here and spending your time with me. It means a lot. This experience, as I'll go into in a bit, is really, it's quite crazy for me because FTD has hit me home in my own life. And I'm going to be upfront. My mom passed away less than 2 months ago from FTD, but I would not have it any other way than to be here and present to you. So if I seem a little bit emotional, it's because I am. I'm here in Denver and I was listening to everything today. And of course, it's gotten me going a little bit. But we're going to get into things, and thank you for your understanding. So today we're talking about this term called balance, but really I think when it comes to mental health of caregivers or mental health of someone who's going through a diagnosis of FTD, balance is not really possible in terms of being in the middle of this equilibrium, right? I think when I say balance today, I want to think more about if you're on this equilibrium scale and your scale starts to tip, what can we do to implement strategies to bring this scale kind of maybe back to middle? Maybe it's teetering a little bit, but not allowing it to go all the way down. And if there's anything you get out of my presentation today, it's how to create ongoing rituals and routines and putting the skills in so that you're not going from 0 to 100 to a place of burnout and then back again. We want to kind of meet in the middle and have the skills to bring us back when we veer off track. So as Anne said, FTD has hit me personally. My mom was diagnosed when I was 19. I'm an only child, and it was a very unknown, scary, chaotic time in my life. And I very soon found out that there were no mental health supports available for a caregiver like me, and there was nothing for FTD at the time. And so fast forward many, many years, I continued to see the gaps in the system. I worked as a social worker in acute care and mostly with people who had dementia and their caregivers, and there were still no supports. And people were coming to me and saying, how do I find someone like you when we leave the hospital? And I would say, I don't know. So in 2021, I started my company, Compassion and Caregiving. We aim to support caregivers, as was said before, and really, I get you. And so thanks again. So we're talking about two people today. We're talking about the caregiver, and we're talking about the person with an FTD diagnosis. We've heard so much today about what it looks like to have the diagnosis from a lived experience. We heard from an amazing panel this morning, if you were able to attend that. And we've heard from a lot of caregivers too. So I'm not going to repeat what was said this morning. What I will say is, there are a lot of complexities and nuances when it comes to FTD that are unlike other diagnoses, other dementias, and that it can look different. My mom had BV FTD, so she had a lot of the behaviors in the beginning, a lot of money spending. There were a lot of words said in public to me, to my father, and it was a very confusing time. And throughout this presentation, I will be bringing elements of myself to highlight the different topics that I'm covering so that you know how I went through this, because I didn't start from where I am today. I started very much like a very confused, overwhelmed, burnt out caregiver, and I didn't know what to do. And for the purposes of this presentation, I may be referring to caregivers, but this very much applies to the person who is experiencing the diagnosis themselves. I do want to highlight that sometimes when it comes to caregivers of someone with FTD, particularly BVFTD, there can be triggers from previous traumas, either with the person that you're caring for, or maybe from childhood or another time. It can reignite PTSD symptoms, and you never have to go through this on your own alone. So everything I say to you today can be used in tandem with a professional, and I do highly suggest always that people seek professional support. AFTD has amazing supports available. There are other supports out there too, which we can tap into later, but just be aware. And if the feeling is overwhelmed as you go through this, make sure you take some moments for yourself to breathe and pause as needed. So why is it important to establish tools and strategies? Well, as I said earlier, it's important not to go from this constant 0 to 100. I work with only caregivers, and I work with a lot of caregivers who care for someone with FTD. And I either find one of three things when people come to me. Number one, they might be coming to me and saying, Stephanie, I don't know what's going on. I will be completely burnt out, and then I put all my strategies in place. I do everything I need to do. I finally feel better, and then I'm okay for 2 weeks, and then I fall off the edge again. Or someone's coming to me and they're saying, I'm just really not okay. I don't know what to do. Or there's the third option where people are coming and saying, people are saying to me that I have an issue, that there's a problem. I don't see it. Frankly, I don't know what I'm feeling. I don't know if there are emotions there. I think I'm okay, but I'm being told that I'm acting differently and I'm not interested in what I used to do. And so these strategies, again, are going to be something that can keep us more on a consistent pathway, where if this is where we're aiming in between this area here, we want to try and stay within it, right? You might have some peaks and valleys, and that's totally normal, but these are ways you can get yourself back, and you can get yourself back more quickly and stay there ongoing. It's also important to note that strategies are not static and linear. So just because something worked for you for several months doesn't mean it's going to work when things are really tough. If you're having harder days, it may not work, and you're going to have to look into your toolbox and get other things out that maybe you have to incorporate to make things better. There are good days, there are bad days, there are everything in between. So if you feel like what you're implementing isn't working, or you're feeling like it worked before, I don't know what's wrong with me, I'm trying everything and it's not happening, that is 100% normal. It just means you might have to adapt. In my own personal experience, I have the strategies that I incorporate regularly, but when my mom passed away and I have 3 little girls, they're 7, 5, and 3, I was not functioning at all. And I realized very quickly that what I was doing before wasn't going to be effective when it came to my coping and my functioning moving forward. So I really had to bring in alternative strategies when I saw that it just was not happening. So that's all fine and good. We're going to talk about strategies, tips, but how do we start? How do we know where to start? And I know that Anne said earlier to grab a piece of paper and a pen. We're going to do a really quick exercise just for time's sake, and you can always come back to this later. But I'm going to have you focus on a few things in your life right now, and then I'm going to go into what that tells us about where we're at and how we can start to incorporate what I'm going to talk about later, because this is about you. Not everyone is in the same situation. Everyone is unique, and I want to make sure that you're identifying where you're at today. So here are the questions that I want you to address. And again, you can always come back to this later. Number one, I want you to think about a recent day. I want you to think about whether you were present, whether you were distracted. When I say live on your phone, I'm sure you know it's like when you're kind of living your life over here and then you're doing the things over there and you're coming back and scrolling. That's what I mean by that, while you're stressed. Were you reactive? So if something happened, were you snapping back? Were you yelling back? Were you stressed? I want you to try to answer to the best of your ability each of the above questions. And then I want you to think about, what do you feel raised your stress and anxiety the most in a typical day, if that even exists. So I'm just going to give you a minute now, and then we'll go over what that means. All right, so I know that was quick. We're going to move forward. So what does this exercise tell us? So if we go back to the previous slide, what I'm looking at is how you're spending your time, how you're spending your energy, how you're spending the moments that you do have. I hear from a lot of people, caregivers or people who are diagnosed, that say, I'm feeling really overwhelmed, but I have absolutely no time in my day to do anything for myself. And when they start to reflect, they realize that they're spending significant time doing things that otherwise would add up to 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day to do something else, even more. I myself have spent hours at night on TikTok in a bathroom. So I understand what this looks like. And it's very tempting to distract ourselves from our emotions. Our emotions can be very intense, they can feel very deep and very painful. And it's really easy to pick up our devices and just distract ourselves, but it doesn't do any good to ourselves. In fact, you may not notice, but there are a lot of reactive things going on when you are on your phone. If you're on social media and you're seeing accounts that might make you feel like you're comparing yourself to other people, or maybe it's making you feel like your life isn't as good as other people have more family, friends, support than you. This is starting to create a negative and reactive reaction in yourself, and you may not even know it. So being aware of the content that you're taking in is really important. It also tells us if you're able to sit with your emotions, if you want to sit with your emotions, if you even know how you're feeling, or if you're just kind of going from distraction to task, distraction to task. And then knowing what you feel raise your anxiety and stress the most is really important, because that can start to give you clues about your triggers. Every single person reacts to triggers differently, and knowing what might start to trigger you is important as we go along. Okay, so I want to talk to you about this cup analogy, and it's probably not this analogy that you would know. I'm going to give you an example of this water bottle. And if you think of water as stress, the more water we're adding and we're not removing any of the so-called stress, the more this is going to fill. It doesn't go anywhere on its own. We have to do things to actually remove the water, otherwise it's going to stay there. Eventually, if we keep piling things on top of this and we don't do anything to remove our stress levels, this water will overflow, and that's going to symbolize burnout. So what I'm going to teach you today, or hopefully try to teach you today, are ways that you can bring this water level down so that we can maybe make it down here. Maybe your water is up here and then you're bringing it here. It's going to ebb and flow all the time, but the purpose is so that we're not getting to a place where this water is spilling over and going all over the place. And that's why consistency is so important. Because if we're just doing one thing or two things when we're feeling really overwhelmed and then letting it go, you're going to spill over and go to zero, and spill over and go to zero. Okay, so we have to start with the big picture, and we have to start slowly. And I'm not expecting you to do every single thing at once. Everyone is in a different place, and it doesn't matter where you're at. You know where you're at the best. So if we think about where we're at as a whole picture, before we start to say what we need to do regularly, I want you to start thinking first about your circle of care, because we can't do the things that we need to do without evaluating our circle of care. And before you say to me, I don't have friends, I don't have family, there's nobody that can help, I get it. I've been there too. And that is not what I'm talking about when I mean circle of care today. I'm going to teach you about this non-for-profit that is available. I've used this with a lot of clients. I've talked to a lot of people about this, and it's ways to reimagine your circle of care so that when you are feeling overwhelmed, or hopefully before you're feeling overwhelmed, you recognize the larger scale of who you can tap into to support that isn't necessarily a friend or a family member. So the non-for-profit I'm talking about is called Atlas of Caregiving, and you can find them at atlasofcaregiving.com. And essentially this mapping strategy it's free on their website. They'll go through it with you. You can download a PDF. They have webinars available for free. But essentially you're looking at every single person in your circle of care that you may not have thought about, including your pharmacist, your doctor, your gardener, your neighbor, somebody who you haven't spoken to in many years who lives in another city. And it's going to map out what the relationships are with these people so that when you are in circumstances where, okay, I don't have time to do anything because the 10 minutes that I do have, I have to garden garden on the grass, mow the lawn. Maybe that's something you're tapping into as part of your circle of care. Maybe instead of going to the pharmacy to pick up medication, there is some sort of a service where they can deliver it for you. So just noticing who is around you is the first step, because we can't do this alone. We absolutely can't. And, we're not made to do this alone. In the past, we lived in small villages, multiple people were caring for people, but yet in North America, there is this expectation that it's one-to-one, and that is just not sustainable. And I've learned that personally, and I see that all the time with people I work with. But you don't have to have the best friends who are showing up every single day, because that's not always realistic or possible. So now that we've talked about our circle of care, I'm going to go through a few different steps with you. And the number one most important piece here is boundaries and communication of boundaries. And you might be yelling at me across the screen right now and saying, I hear this all the time, boundaries. I can't do boundaries. Let me explain to you what I mean by boundaries, okay? So I'm going to bring in, again, my personal experience with my mom. When my mom first got sick, she knew something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. And she knew that someone else needed to do something for her because she was feeling all sorts of off. So I was 19, I was at university, and she started to call me and call me and call me. And every time I answered the phone, she would say, Stephanie, I need help. I don't know what I need help with. I need help. And I would say, I'm studying. I can't, Mom, I can't do it right now. And then she would call my grandmother, and my grandmother would call me and say, your mom needs help. She doesn't know what she needs help with, but she needs help. So I was answering the phone something like 6 times an hour for a while. I was doing this for a while. And it wasn't until I saw my own therapist who said, Stephanie, how are you going to live like this? You can't continue to live like this. You're not studying. You're extremely overwhelmed. You're extremely stressed. And I said, but I can't not answer the phone. My mom needs me. So she started to tell me that I had to communicate and implement boundaries by telling my mom, by telling my grandmother, you know what? I will answer the phone during these times unless there's an emergency. We came up with a background emergency plan. But outside of that, I had to implement a boundary for myself because I had to survive. And this also comes into play if you have family members and friends who might be telling you how to do what you need to do, or showing up in the wrong ways, or texting you and saying things you don't want to hear, or maybe you're reacting to texts right away. A boundary also looks like, how am I going to respond to text messages? How am I going to allow things to come into my life? It can look like events that you choose to go to, social situations. Maybe you're not choosing to go to every single outing that you typically would go to because you're exhausted. That's also a boundary. But the reason I say communicating boundaries is so important, because if you don't communicate boundaries, someone is going to think that you're ignoring them, that you're mad at them, and they're going to come back even stronger. People don't like boundaries at the outset at all because they're used to something that's been one way for so long, and you're going to get pushback anyway. So you might as well communicate so that the pushback lessens a little bit, but at least you know that you've tried to communicate and you have told them what the boundaries are there for. Because we've all had a friend who just stopped talking to us, and we think that we've done something wrong, and we keep trying to contact them over and over again. If that friend had said to us, you know what, I'm in a bad place, I can't talk right now, I will get back to you when I can, we would react a lot better than if not. So number 2, finding the time to connect with yourself, even when it's painful. We have to think of our body like a temperature gauge or a thermometer. In your house, wherever you live, you probably have a temperature gauge. And when your temperature goes up too high, it turns on and it goes lower. Or if it's too cold, your furnace turns on and it goes higher. We don't pay attention to our bodies the way that we pay attention to our cars, our houses, and everything around us. But we have to start to look inwards, and our body tells us a lot of clues. We know from the research that caregivers who care for a long time, who don't tend to their own mental health, develop physical ailments. That's a very known thing, especially there's a researcher called Gabor Mate who does a lot of research and study on this. And we have to start looking in our body. What is our body telling us? Whether that's elevated heart rate, maybe some aches and pains, some pressure, or maybe it's just the raw emotion that we pushed down for so long. We have to take that time. And this does not take a long time. It can look like 5 minutes when you're drinking a cup of coffee, or it can look like having a mindful meal with yourself where you're putting your distractions away. Maybe you're not caring in that moment and you can focus on what you're doing. Just what is happening here for me today? One check-in a day is all you need. And there's nothing that you can do about the situation, but just noticing where you're at is really important because that's going to take us to how do I incorporate different things if I know where I'm at? And every day is going to be very different in this scenario. So number 3 is bringing yourself back to that so-called balance when things feel off. So when you start to check in with yourself for 5 minutes a day, drinking a cup of coffee, oh, I feel off today, I'm feeling a little sad today, I'm feeling anxious today, you will start to automatically do that over time. You'll notice when things are happening in your body. Like for me, I notice when I'm stressed, I get this sensation that goes all the way up from my stomach to my throat. And that is how I know I'm getting really overwhelmed. That's the step before my eye starts to twitch, honestly. And you start to reconnect and understand your body. I understand that emotions are hard. They're vulnerable. They're overwhelming. You don't know what to do with them. You can feel super trapped. You can be dealing with grief. But it's so important to allow yourself to be there with those emotions. We don't have to fix them. But when things are starting to feel off, once we learn how to connect with ourselves, that's when we want to bring in the strategies that we're going to talk about in a minute. So I want to give you some calm hacks where if you're thinking, I don't have time to, take a daily walk, or I don't have time to go to the gym, I don't have time to go for coffee with my friends all the time. These are things that you can do really, really quickly that make a lot of difference for your nervous system, because we want to get our nervous system and calmer, and we want to get our stress levels down. So one way of doing this is with essential oils. You can either breathe the essential oils out of the physical bottle, or you can roll them on yourself. I can't do that. I start to break out into hives. But the actual act of breathing essential oils forces us to take deep breaths and calm our nervous system. When we are heightened and overwhelmed, we actually breathe a lot more rapidly. And when we're doing that, we're signaling to our body that we're in stress. When we're calming our breath down, we are actually signaling to our body to take those steps to calm down. You can also use cold water and ice. So splashing your water with really cold water or putting an ice pack on your forehead can be really effective in calming your nervous system down. It's like a jolt. And this is used a lot in DBT therapy, if you've heard of that before. But if you're out of body, you're dissociated, you just need to calm down right now, even a bag of peas, some people will physically put their head in a freezer. Whatever you need to do, it really, really helps. I even teach that to my kids. Stress balls and squishy balls or fidget spinners are really good. Tense them up, get that all out there, move your hands around. Maybe you're distracted by something. And then there's something called box breathing. So you're breathing in the shape of a box. You might be breathing in for a count of 4, breathing out for a count of 4, breathing in for a count of 4, and breathing out for a count of 4. And there are a lot of signs, if you're here at the actual conference, that tell you, breathe out like you're breathing bubbles, and lots of other techniques. Those are all wonderful as well. But the point is, we're trying to calm our nervous system down once we've checked in and we've noticed that we're heightened. Okay, so A big reason why boundaries fail and a big reason why we can't care for ourselves during all of this is because of feelings of guilt and shame. They are the number one reason why people give up boundaries. They're the number one reason why people don't care for themselves in these really crucial moments. We have these thoughts that come into us that tell us we're not good enough. We're not doing enough. How could we possibly take time for ourselves? They need us more. We can't be here right now. We all have them. We all have them. And we have to start reevaluating these thoughts of guilt and shame as thoughts that are coming in. A lot of times, these are thoughts that are there from when we were children, right? A lot of our parents, very well meaning, have used guilt and shame to kind of put us in our place, but we've internalized that. And these are thoughts that keep coming up over time. It's also something that keeps us from an evolutionary perspective in our place, right? We have to feel shame in groups because if we don't, we're going to go out and, do all sorts of things and then go to jail. Like we don't want to do that. So it has positive effects too. But in the realm of care for ourselves, it doesn't do us any good. So the steps here, and again, this might be something that's done with a professional, is I'm feeling a lot of guilt and shame in these moments, identifying what those thoughts are when they're coming in and allowing them to be there and flow through us like a wave that ebbs and flows. Sometimes it's stronger, sometimes it's not. But again, number one reason why people give up boundaries, give up caring for themselves is just there's something wrong with me. And you might be getting comments from people around you saying, how could you do that? How could you go take time for yourself? How could you have a person to care for here. And you might even be getting that from the person you're caring for too when it comes to FTD. So just noticing those things. What is bringing you back from caring for yourself? What is coming in the way of you establishing your very needed boundaries? And number 5 is I care for myself first. This one is essential. I learned this the hard way. Again, I was a sandwich caregiver between my mom and my very little kids. And if I was overwhelmed and couldn't cope and I was bottled up on the floor in the fetal position, I couldn't care for anybody. If I'm okay, or more or less okay, then I am able to care for others. You are no good to other people unless you are good to yourself. And the strategies that I noted before are the first steps to really getting yourself back on track and noticing and being aware of your internal temperature gauge and noticing where you're at in your body. So I want to go through some case studies. This is important to highlight what we've talked about with some real examples, because I know it can seem sometimes far-fetched and out there. So let's put it all together right now. So first, we're going to talk about Cynthia. Cynthia's mom has a new diagnosis of FTD, and her mom has become more erratic in her behavior. She's swearing at Cynthia and having difficulty problem-solving tasks that used to come as second nature to her. Cynthia dreads going to her mom's house, but she's the only one who can support. She feels her mom is not thankful for her help and wants to stop engaging, but she has no choice. She's very overwhelmed. She has a full-time job and teenage kids, and she's having trouble sleeping at night, becomes very anxious. Her kids notice a change in her stress levels and she doesn't know what to do. And her her mom's neurologist has told her that this is typical and this will continue. So what can Cynthia do here? So if we look back at everything I talked about today, the first thing is that Cynthia is doing everything and she is the only one to support. But what she's realizing here is that she can't do every single thing on her own. Can she tap into something that she hasn't thought about? So she realizes that there is a pharmacy that will deliver medications to her mom's house. So that takes off one thing off her plate. Then she realizes that she keeps going to her mom's house and looking all over the house to see if everything is in working order, if everything is functioning. And she realizes that the next door neighbor is pretty friendly with her mom. So she asks the next door neighbor, is it possible if you can come by sometimes just to take a look, maybe look and see if anything is leaking, make sure that the house is working, and the neighbor agrees. So those are two things that were taken off of her plate. She also realizes that she's not in tune with her nervous system at all. She's having a lot of trouble sleeping. She's on her screen before bed. So she decides to stop going on her screen before bed. And instead of scrolling, she's taking those moments to check in with herself and focus on where she's at in her day. She can't change the situation of her mom. She can't change what's going on with her mom's diagnosis. She can only change what's going on inside of herself. She then decides to establish boundaries with how much time she's going to spend at her mom's house and with what she's going to take in from her mom. Because at this point, her mom is erratic in her behavior and she's taking a lot of it in. So, on days when her mom might be in a mood where she just can't handle it, she's going to implement boundaries and also tap into a behavioral support specialist that's part of that circle of care who can teach Cynthia how to maybe engage with her mom, mitigate some of those behaviors. Maybe there's a reason, a trigger that those behaviors are happening, and she's going to help her focus on that. So she's going to implement all of those strategies into place. She's also going to notice, okay, if I'm really overwhelmed today, if I can't handle it, maybe something big is going on with her kids that day. I'm going to go by my mom's. I'm going to do what I need to do. But today I can't spend that extra time to sit with her like I usually do because I have a million other things going on. And if I take that extra time, that's going to take away from my cup. And that is going to actually add the stress. And we don't want that. So she is starting to notice where in her life she can implement strategies so that she can be on her best self when she's going there. Again, none of this is ideal. It's really about kind of how do we take those steps to start changing things in our lives. Now we have Bill. So Bill has started to realize that his sister, who he was very close to, was having difficulty word finding and began acting confused about what he was saying to her. At first, Bill could not understand what was happening, but after a while, his sister was diagnosed with PPA. Bill was beyond grief-stricken as his sister was everything to him, and they typically spoke every day about life and their problems. As things progressed, his sister was moved to a nursing home, and he started spending hours per day aiding in her care. But at night, he felt so empty and lost. He was torn up by guilt about having to place his sister in a home, and he was really sad about no longer being able to speak with her. He felt badly engaging in tasks he liked because his sister could not, and he started to yell at people around him and was short with colleagues at work. So here, Bill was going from work to his sister, work to his sister. There was no sort of pause for him. There was no self-awareness here. And so here again, we want to start getting Bill to look inside of himself and notice what's going on for him. He's starting to snap at people. So we know something's happening in there. There's an anger response. And a lot of times underneath anger, which we call a secondary emotion, there is sadness. And we know that Bill is feeling sad. So how can he make time just to process what's going on? He also noticed that every time he visits his sister, he's very task-oriented. He's caring for her and what her needs are. And he notices she's in a home. Yes, I have to advocate. Yes, I have to be there to help her, but I also want to make memories with her. I want to be there and actually be the brother here. And he starts to make a conscious effort to create activities that he can engage with her on her level that he also enjoys so that they can have fun together. They can enjoy tasks together. And it's not just him asserting care, but them working together to have a relationship and a bond. He also realizes he can't go all the time that he's going, and sometimes he gives himself a break. Sometimes he taps into external people who might need to go, or he'll just call the nursing home and ask how she's doing and gives himself some time off so he can recharge and feel more focused and more present when he visits his sister. Okay, so I threw a lot at you today, and I know some of it can kind of feel like, how do I put these things all together? But I hope that was helpful, and I hope that that gets you started on thinking about how you can implement these things in your regular life.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Stephanie. You gave some really practical examples, of how we can start to change that cycle, that people get into and feeling like they don't even have the time. You gave examples of just even small ways, to break into the routine, to give people that time to self-reflect and care for themselves. So with that, I have a few questions to get us started, and everyone, you can still send us questions in the Q&A box as well. You talked a lot about, even when you are overwhelmed with caregiving and all of the things you're coordinating, how you can care for yourself in these small ways. But what are some signs that someone might be experiencing caregiver burnout or may really need more professional mental health support?
That's a really good question. Burnout is complicated. It can present in different ways for everybody, but some telltale signs of burnout are not being interested in things that you were once interested in before, either not sleeping at all or sleeping way too much, not being able to get out of bed, feeling really sad all the time, and feeling like you can't assert care for someone else at all. So all of a sudden, you might feel like, I can't do this. There's no possible way that I can care, right? Everyone needs to get away from me. I can't be there. Maybe not being able to focus at work and not doing your regular tasks. Those are pretty common signs of burnout. It's like you've kind of fallen on the floor and you're looking up at the ceiling. It's that kind of feeling.
Yeah. And I know you shared that you really recognized that this was an area that you couldn't even find professionals, who understood, this kind of journey and created your own company, based on that. But do you have suggestions for those that are looking for mental health professionals, therapists, in their areas, and especially if they find ones that they connect well with, but they don't have that experience in FTD?
For sure. I think most clinicians will not have FTD related experience. That's the reality. So I would start to look at people who might have a caregiver lens, but even that is hard to find. Psychology Today is a resource where you can find therapists in your area. It's a website. So if you put in your zip code or your postal code and you put in keywords that you're looking for, something I would highlight is boundaries, grief. Grief is extremely prominent when we're dealing with FTD because you're constantly seeing the person that you once knew change and you are experiencing loss in real time. Sadness and burnout. Those are key terms that I would look up. And then if you think you're experiencing reactions of trauma, that's also looking for a trauma-informed clinician or a clinician who can deal with trauma because FTD can really bring things up in ourselves from our past. You might not even know you're having trauma reactions. So using those key terms are important. You don't necessarily need a caregiver therapist if you can't find one, but finding someone who can focus on those things and understanding that things are in flux and changing over time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. And we do have a question here that came in the chat. Um, how do you deal with a caregiver who may have anger over accepting the person's FTD diagnosis? For example, when they expect more from the FTD person than they're capable of.
Sure. Anger is exceptionally common. I had a lot of it too. And anger is a normal reaction. You're angry about the situation. You're angry about what's changing. You're angry about knowing what might happen in the future. And it's also an element of, maybe I haven't accepted this yet. Maybe I'm not there yet. So I'm all about compassion and bringing self-compassion into the mix, acknowledging that this is really hard and you have to give yourself kindness. You have to honor where you're at in that moment. And you're going to go through those phases of anger for sure. But if you find that you're being really reactive all the time or you can't deal with all of the bubbling emotions, that might be the time where you want to speak to a professional, maybe go to a support group, just to kind of pick through them because there might be so much happening at once. And the person that you're caring for may not have the ability to change their reactions.
Mhm. Yeah. And we know, the journey with FTD is so complicated, often with the years of misdiagnosis, thinking that it may be something else, before someone gets a diagnosis. And I think we hear from a lot of families that may have guilt, for things that happened, before they knew this was
Oh, yeah.
FTD.
Yep.
So yeah, I know that's certainly something that probably resonates with a lot of people here. So can you share, anything about that in terms of that guilt and regret?
I say that you honestly don't know until you know. And we try to find answers. We try to pick out what we do know. I actually had a conversation with someone about this yesterday, where we talked about the anger that we were asserting towards my mom. They were talking about somebody else that they were caring for, and feeling regret. If I had known, maybe I would have done something differently. How could you possibly know that this person had what's now known that as FTD? We automatically go to, substance use, mental health issues. You're lying to me. Something is different. We can't possibly fathom that. And we have to forgive ourselves. And there is this piece of forgiveness in, I didn't know, right? I had no idea. If my friend did that to me, or someone else did that to me, I wouldn't accept that. We have to put up our own limits with ourselves, because there's only so much we're going to take. And it also shows that you have limits and you have boundaries. So giving yourself grace and knowing that you had no idea. There's no other way of knowing.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, absolutely. Um, and I think, you mentioned this as well, in the resource you shared is the Atlas of Care. I think
Yeah,
Sarah shared that link again for us. That a lot of people feel like, well, I don't have friends, I don't have family, or
right.
many times you do, but they really aren't understanding of the FTD diagnosis. Um, and I know, people try to share, AFTD resources with family too, trying to help them understand. But if you can speak to that, in terms of people's support networks, and how to manage, when you have those close to you, who are really not understanding this journey and what it's really like to be living with FTD.
The truth is that a lot of times people aren't going to understand. And people might think they understand, or they'll try to understand, but no one can understand our unique experiences. And it's a hard thing when we realize that, because we want to relate to other people. We want to be able to connect with other people. And I'll tell you, in my own life, my dad was in denial for like the first 10 years of my mom's diagnosis. She was sick for 16. So I couldn't even talk to my father about this. And again, there was this, okay, who can I talk to, right? If I can pick out one or two people who might try and get this, who I can share resources with, who might be able to get on the same page, maybe that's all I have. And maybe I'm picking and choosing who I'm sharing things with. I'm going to be very deliberate about what I'm communicating and to who, because you're going to get hurt by the people who don't get it. Maybe the words that they're saying or the way that they're acting. We're very sensitive in this process, especially during the very hard times and the changes. So be deliberate is what I would say in terms of who you're going to. And if you haven't found that person yet, you will. And there's going to be times where you feel like you've lost everybody. And I will also tell you, you will find new people. It's a very, it is a roller coaster. It's not static at all. And it's up and down and it's confusing, but usually there's a constant that's there. And maybe that's the person that you're leaning on, or it's the support groups, or it's even the clinician or the practitioner. Sometimes that's all you have in those moments.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, and I hope, for those that have joined us today, even virtually, I hope you may have started to make some new connections, because sometimes it is just other caregivers who have experienced the same thing, who are the only ones that understand. And that's our hope here, that you make those connections through the conference, but hopefully through support groups too, which we're always happy to help you connect and find an option that works for you on the helpline.
I'll also say social media.
Mhm.
I know I say like don't distract or don't, waste your time on social media, but it also has its purpose in meaningful ways when you are being attentive to what you're doing. I have made some of my closest friends on social media because the only people who understood me were in Texas and New York, and I'm in Toronto. And those were the people that I spoke to every day. I decided to follow certain accounts and not follow other accounts because I realized that that's where I wanted my energy. And you can find excellent connections on social media.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Well, I think we've answered all of our questions so far, and we're getting to the end here. So there was one resource I just wanted to share as well, that AFTD does offer our Comstock respite grants. But that term respite we use quite broadly. That it can be used for emotional support that support the well-being of the caregiver. So it is for people that are living in the US. I know we have a lot of people from all over today, but that's another great resource that can help you access so many of the wonderful things that Stephanie shared with us today.
Yeah. And if anyone has any more questions, they can always feel free to reach out to me. We have a podcast. We talk a lot about FTD on the podcast. So that's also another resource if people want to tap into that. But that's my contact info just in case.
Right. All right. Well, thank you everyone for participating in our session, and just a big thank you to Stephanie for this wonderful presentation. And as a reminder for everyone, after this, we have a 15-minute break until we will rejoin the main conference session, and we'll hear from AFTD's CEO, Susan Dickinson, at 4:45 Mountain Time, and we hope to see you there.
Thank you
Thank
so
you.
much for having me.
Take care.